Here's the part that's been bugging me ever since the trailer dropped and we've gotten all this criticism from people.
Mm-hmm.
And it relates
How do you
to that
know we
question.
got criticism? You don't even pay attention to Twitter anymore.
I see what happens. I just don't respond. This is the part I don't get. And it gets to are they being sincere? Why should we trust them? The same people who are making that criticism of Rob Reiner and Dan Partland, the same people who are criticizing us and Russell Moore and David French and Kristen Kobes-Dume and everyone else who's in this documentary, Jamar Tisby, all like the same argument they're making that we should not be partnering with a Hollywood leftist producer to do something that could correct or benefit the church. These same people are the ones who use the Cyrus argument to justify their support of Donald Trump. And the Cyrus argument is that Cyrus was a pagan king used by God to help his people. Therefore, they feel fine supporting and voting for Donald Trump and all of his immorality and grotesque unchristian values because he's being used by God to help, in their view, the church. But they don't apply that. No one asks, is Trump being sincere? Should we really believe him? No, they just go along with it because they like what he's doing. But when it comes to Rob Reiner, we get cremated for partnering with him on a project that we think is going to help the church. And we get bombarded with all these questions. How can you trust them? Are they being sincere? But they don't apply that same standard to their support of Donald Trump. I don't get that.
It's because Donald Trump isn't criticizing them.
Donald Trump is deeply criticizing huge segments of the church and huge segments of America.
Well, yeah, but not the people that are fans, because he doesn't criticize.
That's the double standard.
Yeah. So if we say we did this documentary because we feel God has raised up Rob Reiner as a Cyrus figure, then they just have
we didn't
to
even know he was involved.
Oh, okay, didn't know. Cool. Now that you've corrected it, okay. We can't just flip the table, the role, reverse the role.
No, but I don't
spin
think
the
it's
chessboard, so to speak.
It's not wrong to partner with someone outside the faith on something that matters, that's of mutual concern. Mm-hmm. That's not wrong. Mm-hmm. So
what was, in the best of your recollection, John Fia's concern about Christians partnering with non-Christian entities? Well, it kind of sounded like it all. Not just this, because he was saying that, he's careful that he works with Christian publishers and not non-Christian publishers for his work.
Caitlin, you want to take that?
Yeah, I mean, I do think part of what he's trying to say, which I think is a good point to consider, is who you partner with will shape what the thing is. And so I think from his perspective, and it's something I've thought about too with writing books, is like if I was to write, for example, the most recent book that I wrote about how scripture has been used in American political history, there were publishers, non-Christian publishers, that were interested for the purpose of like, let's just do a kind of tell-all of this history of America. There isn't a kind of pastoral or theological point to the end of it because it's supposed to reach this broader audience. Now, part of that's just a difference of what this thing is, which I think is part of the conversation that didn't come up clearly enough on Twitter, is what is the goal of a documentary like this? It is different than the goal of a pastor teaching on Christian nationalism to their congregation, or a book written by a Christian pastor or theologian writing about Christian nationalism from a theological perspective. Some of that's just the difference of the genre. But you do have to pay attention, I think, no matter what you're doing, to the ways that different motivations can sneak in that you don't intend. So I think in a really charitable reading, there could be criticisms of the film that are saying, hey, people go into stuff all the time with good intentions, including people on the right when it comes to politics can get twisted up with people who don't have good character, with policies that don't have good outcomes, but start out with a genuine desire to work with people who are different than them for goals they share. And somewhere along the way, those goals get replaced or twisted, or the method they go towards reaching those goals gets replaced with a really wrong method, a non-Christian method. So I think that's a good part of the criticism. The issue is it can't be that those concerns are so totalizing that you never work with people who are either non-Christians or people who have different goals than you. Like I can imagine of all the people involved in this documentary, they all had slightly different goals for what they imagine this would do for people. Like what you are trying to affect with the larger work you do outside of the documentary is different than what a non-Christian historian who writes about American evangelicalism is trying to do with their work. I want to live in a world where, and I want to live in a church where we can see ways in which those very different goals overlap occasionally, where we find reasons to collaborate and work together. But I appreciate the concerns of people who say, but you have to do that with the recognition that it will shape what the outcome of this thing is. And if you are naive about that, you can end up contributing to something that isn't what you thought it was going to be.
I agree with that. And I know you're echoing what John Fia was saying, but I think it's overly simplistic, because what that argument is saying is, if the source that you're partnering with is non-Christian, you should be really careful and really critical. But the same applies even if the partner is Christian. And I'll give you an example. When I wrote my first book, or I at least wrote the proposal for my first book, it was at the request of a Christian publisher who wanted to publish a book from me. And they said, send us a proposal. So I sent them the proposal. And a couple months later, I heard back from the editor. And the editor said, listen, we took your proposal to the review board. Everyone thought this is an amazing idea. This is an incredibly important message. The church deeply needs to hear this. We 100% resonate with everything you're saying. And we reject the book. And I was like, why are you rejecting the book? And he said, because it's not going to make enough money. And so there's a case where a Christian publisher believes in the message, but their bottom line is the bottom line. And so it's like, well, do I want to partner with somebody who is Christian and says they have a Christian mission, but really the mission is making money? So you can't just say, when you're partnering with Christians, it's all good, go for it. It's going to be pure and holy. And if you partner with non-Christians, be really careful, be really suspicious. I just be careful with everybody. Be suspicious. Make sure you're on the same page. Make sure you care about the same goal here, even if the source shares your identity. That's not a guarantee. And I think that's a lot of the naivete that happens on Twitter in these arguments.
If I was approached by someone saying Michael Moore is making a documentary about the church, I would say, I'm probably not going to participate in that, because Michael Moore is a great storyteller, but he will exaggerate facts. You know, he is a slanted storyteller. And I would say the same thing if someone said, hey, here's a Christian documentary about the state of America from Dinesh D'Souza. Would you like to be in it? I would say no, because he is the opposite side of Michael Moore. He does the same thing of slanting facts to make his point. And I don't want to participate in that, because I was approached by Steve Oken, who's a guy that I've known for a while, who was an executive at PureFlix and an executive at Sony. I had a higher level of trust, you know, and then Dan Partland, the director, when he came in, he's won Emmys for, you know, doing really good documentary work. So it seemed like they were trying to do it in a fair and balanced way as much as you can on any emotional topic. So, and the fact that they were David French and Russell Moore. See, and this is kind of the issue, because the people that are criticizing that list of people for being in this documentary were already criticizing all those people before they decided to be in that documentary. So there was a huge amount of pre-existing bias against those people to find, you know, they were attacking French and Russell Moore for his after-party curriculum already, and now are attacking that because it has some secular funding in it. You talked to David French about that on the last French Friday. Okay, so enough about that. So we've decided it's okay to be in a documentary if you have a fair amount of belief that it will be accurate. Regardless of who the director is.
And one last comment on this. Like, Phil, you and I both seen the documentary, and I think for the most part, we think it's a good documentary. It fairly represents us. Let's say worst case scenario, it was a slam on the church unfairly, or our words were taken out of context or twisted in some way. I'd be the first one to post something online and say, hey, my depiction in this movie is not accurate to what I said. I don't agree with the point of view of the filmmakers. Like, we have the opportunity to speak up and say this was twisted out of context, it's wrong, whatever. So it isn't like we can't speak out if this is a terrible product at the end of the day.